Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network, a division of the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network. The following program broadcast is an original creation by the broadcast entity. Discussion within the following broadcast should be used for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice or consultation. Before considering application of any broadcast content in the following program, please consult your healthcare provider. If you feel you are having a medical emergency, please contact your local health services for immediate assistance. MS&Me Media and the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network do not guarantee or warrant the accuracy of information in the broadcast to follow. The Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network provisions broadcast services to program hosts. Information discussed in the broadcast does not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or goals of the network and are solely those of the show broadcast host. Should you wish to host a broadcast, please visit our website at msmemedia.com and submit a request to become a program host. We thank you for listening to the MS&Me Radio Network. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to MS&Me Interviews. Today's interview is with Ekaterina Dobryakova, an expert in cognitive neuroscience and research scientist in the Traumatic Brain Injury Department at Kessler Foundation. She uses the magnetic resonance imaging to examine the influence and performance feedback on learning and how learning through feedback is impacted by depression and fatigue. A recent article by the MS researchers described a new non-pharmacological approach to reduce cognitive fatigue, a disabling symptom reported by as many as 90% of us who are living with multiple sclerosis. Welcome, Dr. Dobryakova.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's really an honor to speak with you today. I've been looking forward to it.
I'm very excited.
Wonderful. Now, Dr. Dobryakova, you were a recipient of a 2016 Switzer Research Fellowship by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living and Rehabilitation Research, and a 2015 Independent Investigator Grant from the National MS Society. But before we discuss your study on a goal attainment and fatigue, can you explain for our listeners what part of the brain are you imaging in your study?
Sure. So basically, I am specifically focusing on a subcortical structure, so a structure that's deep in the brain, and evolutionarily is an old structure that we share with other animals. It's called the striatum. And that structure has been shown to be involved in a variety of processes, but also in processing rewarding or pleasant outcomes and in processing motivating stimuli.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that for everyone before we got into the structure of the study, because I know they might have been confused about exactly what we were imaging and where this activity is shown for us in the brain. Now, what were your objectives with this study?
Well, so we know that from a lot of basic animal and human research, so not applied research, but basic experiments, that the structure, as I previously mentioned, is involved in reward processing, motivation, and learning. But recent clinical studies were starting to show that it might also be involved in fatigue. And again, from basic research, we know that the structure is also heavily involved with a brain chemical called dopamine. Yeah. And on the other hand, again, clinical research has been showing that medication that engages that brain chemical, dopamine, is helping individuals who experience fatigue to reduce fatigue. So we wanted to see whether reward component and how the striatum, that deep brain structure, is sort of interacting with the fatigue component. So how we can merge these two concepts and to see if we stimulate this brain network that engages the striatum, whether we can reduce fatigue, sort of using this non-pharmacological approach.
That is fascinating. So what methods were used as measures for the study?
So we imaged the brain, specifically looking at the striatum, but we also used a task. It was a gambling task. It might sound funny,
Yes.
but but we use gambling and we use monetary rewards. So money is usually a very good motivator
Yes.
for a lot of people. And in order to get strong research findings, you need something uniform where you will see uniform results. So money is one of such stimuli. It doesn't have to be money. I can talk about it later too. So yes, people basically gambled while we scanned their brains, and the gambling task had two conditions. In one condition, people had this opportunity to gamble and win money, and in the other condition, which was a control condition, they did not have this opportunity. So they were basically simply presented with stimuli and had to press a button. And during the gambling or the condition where they had an opportunity to win money, they had to guess a number. So if they guessed correctly, they were told that they won $1, and if they guessed incorrectly, they were told that they lost 50 cents.
That's
so
fascinating.
so after each of these conditions, we also asked our participants how fatigued they are, specifically after gambling and trying to get rewards, and after just pressing a button and confirming what they see on the screen. And our participants reported that they had less fatigue, so the levels of fatigue than they reported on a scale from 1 to 10, that number was lower after they performed the reward condition, so where they had the opportunity to win money. And fatigue was higher after the condition where they simply were pressing the button and weren't really engaged in the gambling.
So what did the imaging show? Did it match up with the verbal results that you were getting, that feedback from the participants?
Yes, precisely. So we did observe activation during the condition where participants were able to get monetary outcomes. So that subcortical brain structure, the striatum, was activated more when participants had an opportunity to win money, and the activation was not as strong when they didn't have that opportunity, which is consistent with previous results. So again, this is consistent with a sort of larger basic research literature that indicates the striatum to be involved in reward process. And we also have this result of fatigue now, again showing sort of the convergence of these paradigms.
Now, what overall conclusions were drawn from this study?
Right. So I think, of course, this is, in my view, this is sort of the first potential approach to how we can stimulate the brain in order to reduce fatigue in a non-pharmacological way. But again, we use money, which is a very uniform stimuli, but it doesn't have to be money. So I think from a larger perspective, it says a lot about how we can potentially reduce fatigue. Not winning money, but presenting something or trying to find something that's really motivating to each specific individual. It, again, doesn't have to be money. It can be praise. It can be some kind of positive outcome. So if you, for example, enjoy running, you can go running. If you enjoy yoga, you can enjoy yoga, because it for you specifically, it will stimulate your brain and produce more dopamine, sort of,
Yes.
and lead to a reduction of fatigue. Since that's the goal.
So this is the first study showing that goal attainment leads to decreased on-task fatigue in MS and healthy participants. And goal attainment is already incorporated in many neuropsychological rehabilitation efforts, including MS. So relating this to my own life, I'm often asked, how do I do all that I accomplish at my level of disease progression? And I truly believe it's the personal satisfaction I get from seeing the impact of my work and then the work of the MS Global Support Network on education and global awareness that allows me the energy to keep going at this pace. So I do see a correlation.
Yes, exactly.
In my own life. I really do. Now, another study you were involved in, it fascinated me as well. It's how the brain of a patient with PPMS performs under cognitive control demands. Because I am PPMS active, so I find that we are the subject of much less research than those living with RRMS. What was the conclusion on that research?
Okay, so with this study, we looked at the Stroop task. It is an interference task, so you basically have to read a word that says green, but the font of this word is yellow. So you get interference from your from the stuff you read and from the color you see. We looked at individuals with primary progressive multiple sclerosis. And what we did there, we actually employed a specific type of analysis that allows to examine how one brain region affects the activation in another brain region. We looked at the brain regions that are usually involved in this type of an interference task. They are cortical brain regions, so usually involved in, again, interference tasks and working memory tasks. And we observed the connection between a frontal region, the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and a more posterior region being associated with performance accuracy. Specifically during the part of the task where you have this interference, so when you have the incongruent component of the task, so word says green, but the color of the font is yellow, and that's the most difficult part of the task. And we observed that the strength of the connection between this frontal region, left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, with the posterior region of the brain is associated with increased accuracy. So it seems that that connection might be playing a quite significant role in performing this difficult and effortful task, part of the task, when you have this incongruent information.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that was fascinating, and hopefully, that it is an area that will be growing the research into PPMS. Why we have more difficulty doing certain tasks, emotional reactions, and all cognitive levels and function for PPMS as in comparison to RRMS, because there definitely does seem to be an actual structural difference, the way things actually are being interfered with this disease process. But,
right. Yeah. And the structural differences, of course, also affect function differences. So with primary progressive MS, for example, maybe a particular functional pathway or the pathway that's involved in particular task performance, such as in this task, for example, maybe at some point we will be able to selectively stimulate that specific pathway to get improved performance.
Yes, that's very important. And I'm so glad that you are studying that. That's very, very important. I know those of us with primary progressive MS are very excited when we see that that is being studied. Now, the Kessler Foundation recently hosted a conference that was fully funded by the National MS Society, the 2017 Multiple Sclerosis Consumer Conference. It focused on improving both cognitive, emotional, physical health in multiple sclerosis. Dr. Dobryakova, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about who the Kessler Foundation and Institute are and what their work focuses on?
Sure. So Kessler Foundation in general is focusing on helping individuals with cognitive and physical disabilities. And a lot of the work that's happening in my department is focused on alleviating cognitive disabilities, be it memory or how one perceives emotions. And basically, we have a lot of training studies where our participants who enroll can be taught how to identify emotions in a social environment, or how to improve memory on a daily basis. For example, when you go to a grocery store and you have to memorize a list of shopping items that you need to buy. So basically, we're trying to bridge, again, this basic research and information from the basic research, and we're trying to bring it into a cognitive rehabilitation environment so that individuals can use that in their daily lives.
Yes, then it's applied in the therapies. That's wonderful. So our listeners, you can find out additional information by visiting KesslerFoundation.org. That's KESSLER Foundation.org. We will put that on all of our social media, so you can follow up on that and get all of the wonderful information, just wealth of information on KesslerFoundation.org. Dr. Dobryakova is also a member of the Organization for Human Brain Mapping, and she writes for the Communications Media Team. The OHBM Media Team brings cutting-edge information and research on the human brain to your laptops, desktops, mobile devices, in a way that is neurobiologically pleasing, as they say. For more information about human brain mapping, you can follow www.humanbrainmapping.org for her blog, so you can do /blog on that and get straight to the blogs. May I ask you what sparked your postdoctoral interest in neuropsychology and neuroscience research?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Can you share with our listeners what sparked your postdoctoral interest in neuropsychology and neuroscience research?
Yes. So I was trained as a cognitive neuroscientist, basically, doing basic research, but I always wanted to make my research more applied and have, for my research to have an impact, so it helps people. And Kessler Foundation is really the place that helps me do that, because here every day doing my research, I can see how my research can benefit people who might need that.
Oh, wonderful. We really, really appreciate you joining us today, sharing the information with the listeners, bringing this frontline research, to them in a way they can understand. And we will definitely be following up with you on all of your research and the wonderful work going on at Kessler Foundation. So thank you again for joining us today, Dr. Dobryakova, and you have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. Now we're going to bring you the story of a patient who has been impacted greatly by fatigue, and we will see how this research and application of the therapies might impact their life. Thank you again, Doctor.
Thanks.
And now we'll bring on Anisha Hankins, a patient who is living with multiple sclerosis. Welcome, Anisha.
Thank you, Erica, for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Now, you've been living with, is it relapsing, remitting MS, or have you transitioned into secondary progressive?
I am actually primary progressive.
Primary progressive MS. How many years have you been living with primary progressive MS?
That is a very tricky question, I think, for everyone
It
because
is.
because I'd had episodes in my late teens to early 20s, but just kind of dismissed. So I'd had it a long time before I was diagnosed officially. So it's kind of been a bit.
Now, has fatigue been a big issue through the course of your disease?
Yes, it has. That was actually one of the first things that I kept being diagnosed with was chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yes, yes. Quite common. It is for me as well. What kind of impact did fatigue have on your, say, career and family life, day-to-day living?
It was absolutely horrible with the fatigue. It's hard to get up to, go to work and take care of your kids and, keep your house clean, be able to do your chores and things like that you need to get done. It's honestly so hard to deal with and be able to function. It's absolutely grueling.
It is. And did you use a medication to combat that, or have you been using natural methods? How have you been combating your personal fatigue?
Personally, they tried Nuvigil and Provigil at first, and neither one worked for me at all. And then we fast forward to 2 years ago, they tried Adderall with me. That did not work either. So what I ended up doing was getting a good, workout regimen and physical therapy and occupational therapy, doing that throughout the day, which, of course, I'm expending energy, and then getting a good sleep hygiene pattern. And also throughout the day, my doctors incorporated a nap into that. So that did not mess up that sleep-wake schedule too much, with a set time for the nap and a set time to go to sleep and a set time to wake up.
I've used the schedule nap as well, so that was a game changer for me. That really did help. Of course, it doesn't get rid of all of the fatigue, but that did help me some. Did you change your diet at all?
With my diet, I added some things like almonds, things that converted to, energy. Also, B12 supplements helped a whole lot. And what I found, too, was just finding good things and happy things that made me, happy and in a good mood and not necessarily thinking about being so tired all the time. It really helped to combat the fatigue.
So then your real life changes to your routine have actually kind of mirrored what the study we were just discussing from Dr. Dobryakova actually found in her final conclusions, was that if we find some kind of reward where we're either meeting goals, finding joy, or some kind of reward, it can actually reduce our fatigue. Did you find that it kind of mirrored the results of the patients in the study?
I absolutely do, because whenever you end up having to be in the house all the time because you're absolutely so tired, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to take some of my life back, and then you figure out how you can do that by working with your doctors and therapists and stuff like that. And one of the rewards for me with going to work out was being able to mingle and talk with other members at the gym. That was such a reward for me to then interact with people in person and make friends in person instead of just online. That was such a big reward for me. So then it came, invitations from them to be invited to go do stuff, and, that made me happy. And that kind of gave me like a little extra push, to fight that fatigue, although they knew that it was the scheduled naps and, hey, she has to have a nap around this time. But that reward of if I got good sleep that night, I was going to be able to go to the gym. Then my time at the gym, once I got home, you know, or while at the gym, getting to spend time with them and laugh and joke and have that interaction that often gets taken away from us whenever we're chronically ill. Just being around them, I'm here to tell you, just the joy that brought, it helped to combat that fatigue a whole lot because it helped with that depression some.
That makes sense. That mirrors my own experience because I've always loved to work out. Of course, my pool exercises, and we have a fitness center here where I live. However, you know, I would just drag. Even after exercise, I would find I wouldn't get quite the endorphin boost that I would get when I would go to the YMCA and do my chair yoga and all my exercises and my recumbent bike. It just, the socialization. You would just go out of there just like on a high, and you're just like meeting other people, and you know, somebody get on the recumbent bike beside you and you start chatting and you just start talking about your experience and listening to music, and you have that socialization factor that you were talking about that I think is just your reward, your great reward when we are often, like you said, more isolated with chronic illness.
It's such a big treat.
Yes.
It's a reward. Like years ago, like we kind of take it for granted of just working and socializing with people at work, and then you become really sick, and then you're isolated at home. And then once you have that chance that you can kind of get out and socialize with people, it then becomes a reward, and it just helps out so much to help with that fatigue because you're able to then almost feel normal and be able to be around people, and it brings that joy, and it's just a natural high.
It really is. It really is. And if they can apply that study to more things than just fitness in our lives, it's anything that is meeting a goal, you know, is bringing us that joy. This week, I had just a crazy busy week. However, my sons ended up on the AB honor roll. And just going,
awesome.
I've had an impact in their lives, and we met that goal together, you know, working on their homework, their special needs, and it's quite a task with special needs children to meet that goal, and then to see them, the joy in their faces, you know, when they found out how well they had done. And, you know, then you go on a natural high, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm getting so much done. Where's this coming from, this energy? And you realize, it's the satisfaction that you met that goal. You worked so hard for it, and there were afternoons where you were dragging, but you pushed through just to meet, you know, their needs. And then when you met their needs and you had that impact on their life, that joy has just given me a natural high, per se. You know. Yes,
because it's also, too, like you feel useless at some point.
Yeah.
You just feel kind of not worthy, and in order to find things that maybe you can even volunteer for, like, for example, Army Family Team Building for me, to be able to teach the classes to the other people that were learning it, because I'm a core trainer with that, and also with Master Resiliency and, you know, teaching classes in that. It really just brought me such great satisfaction to teach other people the concepts and to teach them about it. And it just made me feel so good to be able to share what I knew. And it gave me a sense of self, and it gave me a sense of self-worth. And I felt so I felt so good, and I felt like I was giving back because MS and things like this, it takes away so much. So it just gives you a newfound pride, you know, and you feel so good about being able to do something.
Yeah, I was telling Dr. Dobryakova the same thing. You know, with my work with the MS Global Support Network, which you're also involved in, our work, our giving back there gives us back so much more. You know, we really do get almost more back than we even give. And it's just when you see the impact that your time and your caring can give, you know, you're spreading knowledge, you're helping people to learn, and you're getting back so much more. And I think that's what keeps us going. You know, you and I both have a progressive form, and yet we're functioning at, I believe, as high a level as we are because we stay so active, because we find something so meaningful, you know, that gives us that sense of accomplishment that these patients had in the study. Well, it was really a pleasure. It was really a pleasure speaking with
amazing.
you. It really is amazing.
I really appreciate it. And, you know, everything that the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network is doing and giving all these amazing opportunity and chances for people who have MS to have a platform to, you know, tell their story, because guess what? Many people feel the same way that we feel, and they just don't know how to express it. And so by you guys giving us this platform to be able to share our story, it in turn is helping others. And then for them to just say, you know, I feel that same way, and I'm able to learn a lot, and I'm going to implement some things like hunting the good stuff, because sometimes we just have to find that one thing in a bad day that makes us feel good, you know. So I can't thank you guys enough for all those great opportunities. It's absolutely amazing what you guys are doing.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you. Thank you for being such a voice, you know, such a source of knowledge, inspiration, and support for so many people in our MS community. And I hope everyone checks out your show again next week. And I hope everyone comes back here and checks out MS&Me interviews. And tell everyone what your show is, Anisha, on the network.
My show is on the MS&Me radio, and which you can also find it on the MSGSN radio. And my show is called MS Journey, and it airs at 1700, which is 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I hope the listeners tune in for that, and tune in for us again next week. We'll be back here at the same time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 1500 International. So tune in. If you need more information, go to radio.msgsn.com. You can get more information on the study. You can get more information on our schedule and check out your other favorites on the network. Have a wonderful day. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.